Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Enterprise Engineering, a podcast by Webiny. Webiny is a commercial open source platform for enterprises to help them manage their content at large scales. Today, we're going to be talking about the experience of migrating from a legacy DXP to more modern solutions. And as my guest, I have Emre from Reta. Emre, could you introduce yourself, say a few words about yourself and Reta, and then we'll dive into our main topic.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sven. Well, I'm working as the partner and the chief commercial officer at Reta. I've been with the company for the last five and a half years now. Well, we are based in Istanbul and Dubai. So what we do mostly is we're working with enterprise customers across food and beverage, retail and media, with applications towards mostly e-commerce, quick commerce, loyalty applications, and media business applications. So that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell. We work with like top-notch brands like Starbucks, Emirates, Pret a Manger, Costa Coffee, and some other regional media brands as well.
Awesome. Those are some nice logos, and I can imagine that you've did a fair bit of that migration from, let's say, a more type of a legacy solution or legacy DXP, CMS, or some sort of a homegrown solution into more modern approaches. And could you maybe speak a bit more about what are some of the main driving forces? Why are customers moving away from those legacy solutions? Like, is it cost? Is it performance? Is it security? Is it a maintainability of those products? Like, what would you identify and say, I don't know, what are the top three reasons?
Yeah, I think like this answer has two chapters. So the chapter one is from the engineering side, from our side. And I think that's a good story that how we met each other with Webiny, because that was a quite organic partnership. So I think it was two and a half years ago. And the customers, some of the customers, this like the first adapters in this curve. So some of them start, the more visionary ones, they started asking us, in the RFP tender process at the sales cycle, they start asking us, guys, you're not gonna build the CMS from scratch, right? So that was the first, because before that, we always got to have the answer. So we want our custom CMS. Our CMS has to be very boutique, etc. So doing everything from scratch was very illogical for us. And CMS was a chapter where our engineers didn't want to dive in at all. So everybody was trying to get rid of that. So that's how we actually run into each other from a developer block. A senior developer in our team referred, let's try Webiny in this project. And then that was the first time. Of course, like from the decision maker perspective, let me try to walk in their shoes. And all, like you said, all of the customers, all of the logos we gain, we are never their first try. We are always their second, third, or even sometimes fourth attempt. And we always do that legacy migration from legacy or a black box vendor. So, I mean, they come to us, like these enterprises generally come to us with a frustration about speed, cost, lack of flexibility. And when it is like a legacy platform, of course, I'm not going to throw out names, but when it's a legacy platform in our domain, so loyalty, e-commerce, media streaming, it's generally that like they cannot build anything. They don't have any mandate on the product roadmap. So that's the general problem. And the second thing is, when it's a black box vendor, even it is more, let's say, modern or newer, the technology, they cannot have mandate on the functionality, because like the business teams want agility. They need higher performance and speed. IT teams need speed in terms of technicality, etc. So this is like the key items that I can count at a quick breath.
Awesome. And you mentioned one particular thing here, which is a black box vendor, even if it's a more modern. What would you say, out of your experience so far, what is harder? Is it harder to move from a legacy solution, even be it an open source legacy solution, to a more modern solution, or is it harder to migrate from a black box solution into an alternative, right? Which one of those two you had more friction with?
Yeah, like technically, I think it's pretty much the same. Of course, like when it is a black box solution, I think it's a little bit easier, because there is already a kind of like a, let's say, API-based micro solution hierarchy and APIs integrated with the ERP kind of like legacy solutions that has to be there anyways, regardless of what kind of digital platform they are using. So any e-commerce platform or any loyalty platform would have to be integrated with the cashier system or with the ERP solution. But when it is legacy platform, they are generally like built-in solutions. So like the big boys, let's say, okay, big guys at the vendor stake, they sell everything in one. So then it is generally harder to, let's say, articulate that.
Okay.
But I think it's generally a mindset thing. So if the organization at the customer side, at the enterprise side, if they have the, let's say, determination and the teams that are ready to do this, then they do it anyways, regardless of it is in-house, vendor-based, black box, legacy vendor, it doesn't matter.
All right, I see. So another thing you mentioned there is that it can be very hard when you have a vendor or a solution that is, let's say, very monolithic in a way that's not composable. So I assume like those migrations are also much more tougher because you can't take just one small portion of it and move it away because everything is so deeply interconnected. It's hard to kind of do it in, let's say, in stages and things like that. So would that be kind of something that you faced or you have had to kind of run through and had some challenges with dealing, having those big monolithic solutions and then moving them into, let's say, not just one solution as an alternative, but maybe even a dozen different solutions?
Yeah, I think, again, like there are, I think, maybe two aspects to this. So the more like this is like the organizational challenges, because again, I think it's a matter of mindset, because MVPing or let's say making something like a small chunk out of a big project and then moving along step by step is, I think, a mindset and a culture. And I mean, I don't want to be sounding very criticizing, but generally the enterprises don't have that mindset, at least in our part of the world, Turkey, GCC, etc. I mean, it's coming there, but I think we still have time, because generally, like they have, enterprises look at the cause like this. Okay, they built something with a provider or internally or with a black box solution, let's say in 10 years, okay, they built this in 10 years. They built something huge. And then what generally they want to do is, okay, guys, can you do the migration as is in 6 months? But again, like then that's not the same thing. That's not like apple to apple comparison, because it's impossible to do that in most of the cases. So you need a good, how to say, a leader or a shepherd on the customer side who talks that sense into the organization. I think this is very crucial.
And you mentioned those organizational challenges a few times. So what are those? Is this just that mindset shift that you need to somehow embed into the customer to explain to them, hey, you can't do 10 years into 6 months. It doesn't work like that. We have to take, I don't know, several milestones, several smaller steps until the whole thing is migrated. What are some of the other challenges with regards to the organization? Are there challenges with, I don't know, fear of data loss, fear of corrupt data during migration? Are there any other types of concerns that come to mind, or types of concerns that you saw within your experience?
Yeah, like again, like regionally, like there are of course like issues like about the data ownership, about like working even with cloud vendors, etc. Like for example, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in Saudi, like they have this data protection as one of the key priorities. So they want to keep the data within the kingdom, but it's a very big nation. So like AWS doesn't have a region there yet. Azure doesn't have a region there yet. So all the fingers point to the GCP solution, etc. That can be one of the problems. And the other problem is like generally like the IT for in big enterprises, like big enterprises where there are like info security teams, like complex IT teams. Of course, like they kind of challenge modern new startup kind of solutions a lot, because like they're comfortable with working, they're comfortable with as is. Like I mean, like their salaries don't change, okay? So I think that's one of the key things. And the second thing is, to wrap up the previous question, I think it's a good example, like the construction industry for comparing with IT, our business. Like they want to do that 10 years experience in 6 months. They want to squeeze and things, or in a year even. But again, like if you want to, let's say, POC or MVP construction, you got to do the infrastructure anyways. You got to do the entire thing anyways. So that's sometimes pretty much what we face. And generally the marketing teams and the not IT teams, but marketing teams, business teams, commercial teams, they never want to give up on the quantity of the features. They want to have the entire thing because they fear loss of revenue. And I think they're right in a way with that concern. And also, I think another thing for Webini and Red, that this kind of domains where we both address the CTO and the CMO, starting from the pandemic, we at Red Hat strongly believe that there was a strong, let's say, clash between those two titles, and the kind of like shadow CTOs popped up like mushrooms. So like CMOs, they started to take decisions because the upper management or the, let's say, the boards were expecting things at a very agile and speedy way. And I think most of the infrastructures, especially in retail, grocery, those kind of areas, they kind of start to fall apart because the IT lost control of the entire architecture and stuff. I think that's also another thing. Now with the new projects that we are trying to onboard, or when we talk with a customer at the sales cycle, we always see this kind of, let's say, damages, or damage would be good, damages at the customer architecture. So they have so much vendor inflation, I would say. There are so many marketing tools, MarTech tools integrated, then the migration process itself becomes a huge chunk. Yeah. So
there's two things there that you said. So I know from our conversations previously, we would either speak to a technical person or a marketing person while evaluating our solution. But more and more, we see one of those people driving the process, but the other party also being very, very engaged, right? So if the IT is driving the decision process, they do make sure the marketing team gets to meet us, talk to us, gets their own demo, gets the time to ask their own questions, runs their own POCs and stuff like that, which I think, to be honest, is the right way because, hey, well, this one part of your organization is going to manage the solution, scale the solution, and secure the solution, while this other department is going to be using the solution to create content and eventually bring more revenue to the company. So you do need to keep both of them involved. But also going to one other previous point that you mentioned, which is that the IT guys tend to, like, their salaries don't go up or down depending on the solution which they choose, right? Want less work and stuff like that. And this is kind of like one of the mindset we often see is, hey, nobody got fired from picking an IBM, right? IBM is considered, let's say, a legacy in this sentence. So, but it's proven, it works, right? It's not the most modern, it's not the most agile, it's not the most scalable. It's just proven and it's secure, it's established in the market. And that's what I think, like, this is more of a bit of a legacy, outdated mindset approach that was on the market for many, many years. But I think lately, because the innovation is so quick and there's so much new stuff happening every year, picking IBM has a even greater delta between what modern and legacy means. And that gap is widening exponentially, that people are now more aiming towards, hey, I might want to kind of take the risk here and pick a startup. Because this is kind of how we manage to open some doors, even with large enterprises, is we try to convince them, hey, you're going to be losing a lot on all of this innovation. Sure, you might be safe, but you don't need to do a big bang. You can start with a POC. You can start with a smaller project. Let's prove that this smaller startup has the capabilities that you need as an organization on a smaller project, and then grow up from there. And those type of approaches, I think, are what we see working more and more with regards to winning customers, especially in the enterprise space, because that is, I think, the space where it's really the hardest to position a startup or let's say a new upcoming solution to the market. when it comes to like picking, like we talked about those challenges on what legacy means, what are the challenges both on the technical side, on the mindset side, and also what are some of those requirements or the needs that are driving the migration. But then if you look at the other end of that spectrum is, what is that model alternative? So how do you go about choosing which model alternative you want to go for? What are some of the criteria that you feel like are the most important from you as, let's say, a partner implementing this solution or migrating? But also, what are those things that like in this case, a client, an enterprise client, looks for? Like what? Because they are putting trust in you and your organization to make the best choice. But to reframe that question is like, are they influencing that choice? And what are you as an industry expert looking for when you are evaluating those solutions? I know you mentioned the story how one of your senior engineers found and picked Webiny, and now you're running a dozen or more projects on Webiny, but it started with a very small one. But what are those criteria that you go about when you want to pick a more modern alternative to a large enterprise solution?
Yeah, I mean, from Red Dot perspective, when we select a partner or a solution that we want to work with technically, we generally keep that decision on a very, very technical level. Because Red Dot, I mean, like, we are like a software house, but we have our own products, and our North Star KPI is always to accelerate development time. So every partner or solution that we use in our tech stacks must be helping that purpose. That's the number one thing. And we generally split those partnerships under two. One are the things like vendors or the partner solutions that we use at the back scene, like our enterprise customers wouldn't know. It's for our own good, to improve the, let's say, agility, etc., or the quality. Of course, customers are affected by it, but they don't say it. So this is a very technical decision. I, as the commercial or the operational leader, I don't get involved even in that process. And the second thing is the solutions and the partners that our customers see, that let's say they procure from us one solution on an end-to-end basis, and they say, okay, guys, you can bring on other partners. And I think Webiny definitely falls in that section. So for the second part, again, the decision is mostly technical because our KPI is always the same. So we have one common goal to decrease the development time, to accelerate it. But then again, for customer facing things, we need to have that, okay, like, is it a startup or is it a company that I can easily present to my enterprise customer? Would they think that there's lack of professionality, etc., etc.? So I think these are the major concerns from business side. And from the enterprise perspective, again, I think like the key thing here is the agility and time to market. Because generally all of our customers that I saw in my tenure at Red Hat, they are frustrated with the, let's say, slow timelines, delivery timelines that they receive from black box vendors or legacy vendors. Because when it's a black box vendor, it's generally one code base serving sometimes thousands of customers or hundreds of customers. And let's say the goal of the companies that we work with, the enterprises, generally they don't fall under the same goals with the vendor, with the black box vendor. Because generally, like, for example, take coffee industry, for example, we work with Bread, Manje, we work with Starbucks in Turkey, Kazakhstan, we work with Costa Coffee in the UAE. So all of them, again, they have a migration story. And the vendors that they migrated from, they generally serve like very small restaurant chains, like 5-10 branches. But Starbucks here in Turkey, they have 750 stores. So they cannot have the same digital roadmap. So they need faster features. They need faster functionalities. They need third-party integrations that they will only use. But this doesn't match with the priorities of that company because they need to increase their traction, etc. They are also better, right? And when it's not a black box vendor, but a legacy provider, okay, like IBM categorization. So they are the victims in this podcast. So for the IBM categorization kind of vendors, I think it is like they have generally the main brand, and then there is a system integrator involved, a local partner, let's say, right? Again, like now you have to understand if the partner is correct, if they have the relevant experience, etc. Then they generally need support from somewhere outside the operating country. So these are all the elements that lead to the frustration and lead to the decision to change the solution vendor. So the total cost of ownership, again, after time to market and agility, TCO, total cost of ownership, is definitely important thing. Business continuity, I think, is very, very important. Very important, because then again, like, okay, the migration is done, but what next? Okay, so generally, like when we are finished with the migration, then the business teams, they are like waiting, like racehorses. And then when the migration is done and we are live, they start shooting the features that they have been waiting, that they're waiting for maybe 1, 2, 3 years already. So ability to respond to that, let's say, feature sets request is also very, very crucial. And then, of course, I have to count the technical part, but that's like a hygiene factor. So that's why I'm telling it the last. But like API first, microservice, headless, these are, again, very important, because then they need to understand, like, they need to, let's say, divide and conquer. So they are tired of monolithic solutions. So that cannot be a discussion anymore.
Yeah. So in a way, there's also a kind of a backwards approach here, which is a customer needs to do a specific thing. They need a specific product. Then you're looking for which product on the market gets you there the fastest, right? And the thing is that most of the projects within the enterprise space don't always fall within the, let's say, an out-of-the-box SaaS solution, because you can't customize it, as you mentioned. So you're looking for, hey, what's the best product on the market that I can customize, integrate, and in some cases white label, so that the customer doesn't even know what's going on under the hood, as long as you meet their key objectives, which is time to market, right? It's the cost. It's that velocity at which they will be able to the new solution and earn more money, be better at their processes, more efficient, whatnot, right? But of course, through that process, as you said, there is that technical aspect, and that technical aspect, I assume, has multiple layers, one being customizable, but the other one being pretty much like what features it has out of the box, how much does it cost as well, and things like that. Which totally makes sense, because at the end of the day, any decision that a business is making, it's making to either cut cost or increase revenue, right? It always ties into that. And those are, I think, what we saw always, these are the main initiatives that are the driving forces behind certain projects, because there's no other reason. Business has its purpose, and it's always to kind of make money, either for the shareholders or for the owner or whatnot, right? So awesome. And when it comes to like looking back, right, since you've did a lot of these migrations, what are some of the, let's say, lessons learned? What are some of the key steps that you say, hey, never ever miss this step, it is so important, right? What would be some of those steps or those learnings?
I mean, like, again, like from the vendor perspective, trying to sell to enterprise level customers, I'm going to answer that question. So one, I think I always regret asking few questions. I think that's very important, because the more you ask, and let's say when you start receiving, I mean, like, of course, this is not like a sales advisory podcast, but I mean, like, if they're not giving answers, either they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know what they want, or you are just like the procurement alternative to a already made decision, right? Formality. So I think asking questions is very important, because when you start asking good questions, and then you start understanding who is who does what, and you can also start determining what are going to be the pitfalls, what are going to be the biggest challenges. And I think it is also very important to determine the early wins. Okay, so you generally talk with people who who have like a lot of experience there. And when you go more west, let's say to Europe and USA, I mean, the tenures of the employees start increasing in most of the cases. So they're very, very experienced with what they do. And sometimes it's like a reflex. So they don't even consider sharing everything in to your questions because it's a hygiene factor. It's already there, etc. So I think understanding those challenges and determining let's say, the best MVP, the best phase one, determining the early wins is very important. So just like you said, okay, to sum up everything, why people do change their infrastructure. Are they crazy? Their salary is not going to change because they need to decrease cost and they need to increase revenue, etc., or profitability, right? So you have to define those first 30, 60, 100 days gains when you make the implementation. So I think that's very, very, very important. And coming back to our experience, in 80% of the migrations we did, when we make an apple-to-apple comparison, in day 2 of the new platform with us, we always had the same or bigger revenue when we make that like-for-like comparison. Understanding the organization structure, who has the most influence, who has the decision-making capabilities, who are the people that are going to actually help you. I think these are the things I wish I had known better or more.
So it's funny listening to your answer because it's all about human relationships that you've kind of mentioned. There's not a lot of technical stuff there, right? So the lessons learned are more on that human side to manage expectations, to gather, I would assume, the right reasons why you're running this migration, the right reasons for or measurements of success, how you're going to prove that this is a successful migration. So it's everything around the technology, right? Technology is just the vehicle for executing this project. The project is not about technology, neither it should be. It is about business needs, and business needs come from people. They don't come from tools or applications or technology, right?
Exactly.
We've faced quite a lot of similar cases where it's all about asking the right questions. And as you mentioned, it's not a sales podcast, but even from the architectural standpoint of like when somebody says, hey, we have this project, right? And you're trying to nail down if your solution fits the project requirements. Yes, there's the technical aspect of that. But there is the business aspect that you need to nail down, right? You need to get those requirements right. And when somebody asks a question, can your product do this? This is the wrong question. We always counter ask that question as in, what do you as a business want to do or achieve? Right? Let's talk about that. Not can my product do this? This is not the right question in like 99% of the cases, right? Just rephrasing that, what do you as a business want to achieve? It's going to open so much more in your product, helping them achieve it in the most optimal and efficient and cost-effective way.
Exactly. I mean, like people are not very used to the term composable, modular, and I think it is being misinterpreted. So, because even like monolithic architectures say, okay, we are composable. So I mean, like having something, let's say parametric is something else. Having something composable, but really like literally composable is something else. But I think that's a discussion that you will always lose as a vendor at the discussion table because it's a too technical issue and generally it's all about business.
And what would you say were the main outcomes or success stories from some of your migrations? Were you winning? Like, were your customers most happy with regards when they did the migration? Like, what were those main wins for them? Was it cost? Was it agility? Was it business continuity or something else? What would you say? Like, yes, I as a business or an enterprise have this pain. I want to go through this migration. I know why I'm migrating. I know how to pick my solution. I know the steps of migration. But when I'm on the other side, when the migration is done, what do you see from your customers as the biggest wins that they can then say, yes, this migration was fully justified because of this metric or this experience.
Yeah, I think from business perspective, like from CEO or chief commercial officer perspective, the first thing is loss of revenue, because that's generally what the upper management fears. So when we make a migration, because of probably the bad experiences they have, they mostly fear that we are going to lose revenue and customers. So if you can, like in our experience for loyalty platforms, where the major KPI, business KPI, is the loyalty revenue percentage over the total revenue, or the loyalty checks with loyalty transactions over the total checks percentage are the main KPIs. So having that percentage at the same or upper level in the first 1 month, 2 months, 3 months is a very key metric. And e-commerce, the number of transactions is a key metric. But again, like this is a KPI that you need to determine in the migration process. From the agility perspective, after the migration, people generally, like companies generally need a 1 month or 2 month, let's say, cool off period where they need stabilization, etc. Because it's not a pinky world, of course. But after the third month, I think the agility to launch new features, the agility to launch new features without bugs, with, let's say, clean CI/CDs, etc. I think that's also very important. Like seamless deployments, version upgrades, this is very important. Decreasing the time in DevOps, like infra level. This is something we experienced from Starbucks. Like they used to send like push notifications in 100,000 kind of batches to over 2 million customers 5 years ago. Now they can send as a bulk. Nobody monitors the traffic. Nobody monitors if the application is going to respond, etc. So that investment, that money is going to either cost cutting or to building new features faster and more. And the other thing I would say is the decrease in the cloud cost. Since composable and serverless come together, there is a good possibility, and if you don't do things wrong, then the cloud cost will go down. Because in retail, let's say for a shop in the mall, right? You pay the rent for 30 days. You don't pay for the open hours from, let's say, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., but you pay for the entire 30 days, 24/7. But it doesn't have to be like that in the e-commerce. But if you use a serverless architecture, then you just pay for what you use. So when we migrated Turkey's biggest quick commerce provider, not quick commerce, but I would say like low cost, hard discounter grocery chain, their e-commerce and delivery system to us, the CTO called us, and at the end of the first week in live, they said, okay, guys, I checked the AWS account. The amount of the bill is very, very low. There must be a problem. Can you guys please check? Then we checked in like 10, 15 minutes, and we told him, okay, this is the normal version, because he's not very used to. So he told us like, okay, you know what? Please keep an eye on it and send me a report at the first months. So their cost decreased by 75%.
And it's because of moving to serverless.
Exactly. Because they only pay for what they use, and they have the greatest speed and agility. So if like our mindset is like, if AWS, GCP, Azure, those kind of like big companies, if they work on that infrastructure level, so we treat their managed services like a supercomputer. So then our entire development team focuses on creating the value. So that's like a key thing for us, that we generate that value, because it's also reflecting in our prices, so that the cost of ownership also goes down.
So it's a very good summary, right? So there's a lot of business wins essentially on the back of a successful migration, right? Cost, increased revenue, reliability, as you mentioned. And these type of stories just help management to push for more and more migrations, I think. Because like once you do a successful project of such a migration and you cut the cost for the largest e-commerce in Turkey by 70%, just imagine the amount of savings that's behind that. It's going to be super easy to then go and justify even more migration projects down the line, right?
Exactly. And also like a qualitative thing, I think, is the quality and the, let's say, the positiveness of the relationship between the, let's say, CCO, CMO and the CIO, CTO level. So if that relationship is going good after the migration, then I think I would say it's a good job, good done.
Yeah, true. Nice, nice, awesome. And it's like also this also speaks on the technical level about serverless, because like in e-commerce, it's all about saving milliseconds, making the website faster and faster and faster. Like every 1 second added to the load time, I don't know, decreases your chances of successful conversion by 5% or stuff like that. And serverless previously was kind of like, oh, serverless is slow, or cold start issue, stuff like that. It's no longer the truth, right? Serverless is fast, serverless is responsive, and like through your story, serverless powering such a large e-commerce really says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like cold start is like when in the brick and mortar world, say you are the first customer to enter to a Starbucks store, right? Or to a fashion apparel store. So the guy, the seller guy in the store just got his first sip of coffee. Maybe she or he didn't even take the first sip. So okay, the answers can be slow, etc. But cold start even today is not working like that. So yeah, there is that kind of, let's say, resistance, I would say. But I think like modernizing this digital experience platforms, and digital experience platform, of course, is a very wide and broad expression. It can be CMS, it can be order management system, entire e-commerce system. But now like legacy platforms and black box solutions. So some companies do more than 50%, like brick and mortar and online both. When they do hybrid business, sometimes like the online world is 50, 51%, the majority now. So, and it's going to be the majority one day soon. So it has to be different than what they use with their competitor, right? So that's why I think like this composable solutions where they have a good infrastructure behind, and then they build their own needs accordingly, is going to be a trending thing. Probably we will also have AI accelerating, helping this kind of platforms, because probably like development with AI is going to help cloud native solutions like what we are trying to do in both companies, but they are not going to help monolithic lift and shift cloud solutions, because they are not going to enjoy the privileges of the cloud native managed services. Again, that's of course another discussion level, but I think this is where we are, let's say, we are steering now.
Unless we have robots powered by AI in physical stores. But that's also a potential future, you know?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Emre, thank you so much for your thoughts and for your time to share all of your wonderful experiences with us and our audience. Before we log out, so do you want to maybe say where can people reach you or learn more about Reta in case they have an enterprise project and or a legacy system that they want to modernize?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Sven. It was really nice conversation. So it was like, I hope people who are going to listen, watch, like they will, let's say, not maybe learn something new, but they can have something like an aspirational or a positive thing, or they can maybe match what they hear with their experience and feel like, okay, I'm not the only one. So people, they can always reach out to me from our website, redtar.io, or from LinkedIn. I'll be always happy to help. And I don't think like that, and just to wrap up like what we all talk, I think like to summarize everything, I think that modernizing this DXP, the digital experience platform, it's not like just a platform decision that you choose, but it's like an organizational change and unlock. So the vendor should be right, but the enterprise or the customer also should be ready for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Once again,
yeah, there's a lot involved in that, especially on the human side, as we discussed. All right, awesome. Well, Emre, thank you once again for your time, and to our audience and listeners, make sure you subscribe to our podcast for many more episodes. We'll put links to Reta and to Emre in case you guys want to connect with him and the company. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Thank you again. Bye.